as a piano teacher, I notice there are certain rhythm patterns that students just really commonly get wrong, or they just really don't know how to count. The first one we're going to talk about is basically straight rhythms. Now, this isn't one that students commonly get wrong, but you really need to know this because it's a basis for pretty much everything else we're going to talk about. So let's go in a little bit more detail. So, obviously in the first little picture here, we have 4 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And obviously if you're in 4/4, you're just designating each beat to each of those quarter notes. Very, very straightforward. Eighth notes, which is the picture below it, is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, as you may know, as we covered in other lessons. If you don't know, I will put a link to a lesson I did called How Rhythm Works in the description. And then you have the 16th notes, 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. I guess I should show you these on the piano. But like I said, if you're this far, you probably know these already. 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. Basically where you're breaking up each beat into 4 parts. But let's get into the part of the lesson that I was talking about where students commonly get wrong. And this first grouping, of course, is going to be the dotted quarter eighth rhythm. So many students get this wrong, and they either don't know how to count it or they count it very sloppily. And what I like to do, obviously, is think about how many beats a dotted quarter note is going to get, right? Well, it gets 1.5, as you know, since the dot adds half of the note's value back to itself. So if you have a quarter note worth 1, 1 plus a half is 1.5. But when you're breaking notes beats down into halves, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you have to keep in mind an easier way to think about it instead of just saying, all right, it takes up 1.5 beats and like how many of those does it take up? It can be really confusing. So what I like to do is, actually, I think this is a better, oh, maybe not. Anyway, I'll show you right here. But anyway, what I like to do is I like to break down, think about how many halves are in 1.5, and the answer is 3. So if you're breaking the beats into 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, the dotted quarter note is going to take up 1 and 2, right? Since each of these now represents a half. So 1 is a half, the and is another half, and then the beginning of the next beat is the third half that you need. So 1 and 2, and then and is going to be that eighth note. 1 and 2 and, just like that. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, just like that. And if you really want to know, it's actually the same rhythm as Deck the Halls with, right? Bum, ba, bum, bum. 1E and a 2 and, just like that. So if you want to designate a song to each of these rhythms, I also recommend that as well. But that's the first rhythm that I find a lot of students get wrong, is that dotted quarter eighth. Remember, a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, just like that. All right, let's get on to the next rhythm that I find a lot of students miss, which is the 8th and 2/16 rhythm. So a lot of us know how to count 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and then a lot of us know how to count the eighths, 1 and 2 and. But a lot of students get confused when we start mixing eighths along with 16ths. And how you count this one is, obviously you have beat 1. Actually, let me show you the slide here. You have 1, and then and is going to be the second half of the beat, since the eighth note is actually going to take up 1E, and then you have and So it's like counting 16ths, 1E and let me show you now here. 1E and 2E and except the first one, 1E and is going to take up 2 of those syllables. Because remember, when we're breaking up into 1E andas, 2E andas, we're breaking up each beat into 4 parts. So remember, an eighth now gets 2 of those parts, and then the other 2/16ths get the other. So 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and you can count it like that. I like counting it like that because it really helps me at least space them out. You can still count it as 1E and a 2E and a 3E and but I just like the 1 and a 2 and if you're having trouble maintaining a consistent tempo throughout, then I definitely recommend adding in the other subdivisions in there. All right, so just remember 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 just like that. So make sure you practice that, and whenever you identify that in a piece, make sure you're counting it right, because a lot of students do not, including this next one, which is the opposite, where you have 2/16 and then an eighth. So we have now 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and just like that. So you have two short ones, bump, bump, and a longer one. Short, short, long, short, short, long, 1E and 2. Now let me show you on the piano. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. Now if you want to make sure you're maintaining consistent tempo, when you hit the eighth note, the second part of that beat, still make sure that you are counting you're just going to be playing one beat for that. So it's 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and or 1E and 2E and 3E and just like that. All right, let's get on. There is, of course, another pattern that students often get wrong, which is, another type of rhythm pattern that students really get wrong a lot is triplets, going from quarters to triplets, back to quarters, back to triplets. Because you're going from just counting one beat to splitting up into threes, back to one beat, especially if you're used to playing quarters to eighths and then back to quarters. It could, excuse me, a little burps. It can be a little bit tricky to maintain that consistency. So I'm just going to give you a few tips on it here. So, obviously, if you know how to count triplets, an eighth note triplet, we're not talking about quarter note triplets yet. And, of course, there are more rhythms than this that students get wrong. But these are the most fundamental. But anyway, if you're counting out this rhythm, 1 triplet, 2, right? What I would do is I would still continue to say triplet. So, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, even though I'm playing one note there for that quarter note. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And that way you'll be maintaining a consistent tempo overall. Because if I just start counting 1 triplet, 2, 3 triplet, 4, I think I did fairly well at maintaining that consistent tempo. But it's a lot harder. Like, I just am not sure. I'm almost doing a little bit of guesswork in terms of how long I'm holding that quarter for. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. The reverse is the same too, where if you have beat 1 here and then I would still count 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, just like that. So make sure that you're still maintaining that division into 3, even when you count into quarter notes. It works the same way if you're doing eighth notes as well. You want to be maintaining that subdivision there. Now, it can be tricky sometimes to go from triplets to eighth notes, 1 triplet, 2 and 3 triplet, 4 and. Now that's something you'll just kind of get the feel for over time, going from breaking up the beats into triplets and tuplets, or duplets I should say, breaking them up into 2. So that part does take a little practice. But when you're going from quarters to eighths, or to triplets, eighth note triplets, that's what I meant to say. Can't talk today. And then back and forth, you just want to keep maintaining that subdivision. All right, let's get on to the next part of the lesson, which of course is a review of all the fundamental patterns we talked about today. So if you need to pause the video or take a screenshot of this, remind me when I post the recording of the video. I'll try to get this posted somewhere, maybe up on my website, so you can print it out. If you need to. You can find these online as well, but these are all the ones we talked about tonight, where you have the straight quarter notes, where I'm going to read down the left column first and then the right column. So the first one on the left column is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you double the notes in the eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And now you're quadrupling the quarter notes now in 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and so you're breaking them up into 4 now. And then, of course, we're getting into the first one students always get wrong, which is the dotted quarter note to eighth note, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Remember, it's the same as deck, it's actually the first two notes of deck the halls. Deck, the, 1E and just like that. 1E and 2E and It's that same kind of rhythm there, so you can use that as a reference. The next one is the eighth sixteenths, which is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and And then the opposite of that is 1 and, 2 and, 3 and. Almost sounds like the beginning of Jingle Bells. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. I guess you could write it in that rhythm if you wanted. And then the last one we talked about was the 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, with the triplet and quarter note rhythm. So as I mentioned a little bit before, that there of course are a lot more of these types of rhythms. There's a type of rhythm that you always get wrong and that you are really confused with. Please let me know in the comments. So then when I make another video, an update to this one, I know which ones to include, and I can also help you in the comments, or somebody, one of our awesome students in our community could help you out as well. So let me know what you think. I really want to know which ones you struggle with. These are probably the 5 most common, but I could probably, if I thought about it some more for another hour or so, I could probably come up with 5 more pretty easy, especially with your suggestion. So if you're not used to counting rhythms at all and you really need, you feel like you need to catch up to understand this lesson, check out the lesson I made called How Rhythm Works, I believe. I may have named it something else. I'm going to put a link in the description or some links around that you can click on as well as another playlist to practice some of these rhythms. So thanks everybody for coming out for today's lesson. This has been Tim from Lessons on the Web. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great year of learning piano, and I'll talk to you real soon. Thank you so much.